Okay, good morning, everybody. So glad to see you all here. This has been such an amazing conference so far. We learned so much yesterday, and in fact, we identified several ways in which we can tie in some of that material into what we're planning to talk about today.
And good morning from me as well. I'm Joe Green. I'm a hospice chaplain, and I'm here with my colleague Judith Mintz, who is a hospice social worker. And we work in the greater Chicago land area. Before we get started, I want to offer a special thank you to our company for supporting this project and certainly our participation in this conference. Also, a special thanks to Jumana Barodi and Peggy O'Connor and Gemma Ramos, who are with the ALS clinics that we serve in our area. We are here because we have created a tool, which I hope you have referenced there in front of you. And really a good way to describe this tool is that, and this is a monumental statement, I know you will see, but that it really brings together all the resources that we have heard today, yesterday and today at this conference, and even beyond that. But obviously it is a concise framework. It does not include all that information, but at its simplest form, you could say that it's a checklist. It's a checklist so that our clients, our patients, our staff, and the caregivers can be well prepared and ready as this disease progresses in their life and how they live with this disease. But at the forefront of this concept is that it is based on values, what's important, and then goals of care. It really was conceived to start at the end and then work back as the disease progresses and address each of these needs, goals based on what is important to these individuals on a timely basis. At the core of the theme of this workbook is this idea of discovery, and while it's a commonly used phrase, I think it's very profound. We think it's very profound that whether it be staff or patient or caregiver, those we're dealing with don't know what they don't know. And so that's what this tool accomplishes, is introduces those areas that they don't know. To quote, and with the evidence that I put forward, that really we're addressing the issues that we've talked about here. To quote Marcella Sacco in her presentation, Why Palliative Care in ALS, early care planning assures lower decision burden when aware of patient preferences. That speaks to what we're addressing here. We recognized a need. It's probably obvious to all of us here, but it's not to those that we train, those that we deal with. Those living with ALS are seeking answers to questions they have about their future. The ALS Assessment Guide offers hope. We believe strongly in that. Hope that they will be able to make choices as they determine based on what is most important to them. And so to quote this time Denise Harris in her presentation yesterday, there is more to a person than MND. Introduce this model, her model, to new clinicians, which is a very important part to us. Document wishes early with advanced care planning. There is more to a person than MND. The purpose of this guide is to anticipate disease progression and possible future challenges, clarify and identify support and resources, explore potential interventions, and consider the choices they offer, assess values, and make well-informed decisions based on identified priorities, gain insight on anticipating needs, and making decisions in advance of need while the options are still available. This is very much an anticipatory approach instead of the common reactionary approach as symptoms present themselves. And so again, to quote Marcella, not only in the here and now, but also tomorrow and the days after, describe the therapeutic possibilities for the acceptance or not acceptance of any therapeutic proposal. And so in summary, it's a pathway. I mean, even when we get hospice patients, they have still not addressed many of these issues. They've been told probably a number of times. They either weren't ready or they weren't willing or they didn't see it in its clarity. And so we get that opportunity that we don't want to neglect. And so it's a pathway, a gateway to the many questions and options, again, as we've already discussed here at this conference. And so Judy's going to break down now further the guide with some of the same evidence as how it prompts the discussion that we owe those that we care for.
Okay, so I want to start by talking about the first part of this, know your support. It's important for everyone who's living with ALS to be aware of who's on their team, who's there for them. It's also important for those people on those teams to be aware of each other. So who could those potential support people be? We have a palliative care team, potentially, a hospice care team, other clinical resources, the care partners, the families, and other supports such as financial, legal, insurance, community resources, social services, and research studies and clinical trials. Yesterday, Susan Brumby talked about, in her discussion Unveiling the Silent Journey, that there were 14 different disciplines engaged in the care of her patient. And when you have 14 different disciplines engaged in the care of one person, the potential for conflicting information is huge. Everybody has to be on the same page with the messages that they're giving. There's also questions at that point about who's doing the heavy lifting when it comes to the difficult conversations. Is everybody kind of doing one of these in terms of who's going to bring up the potential consequences of engaging in BiPAP support, for example? Everybody has to know who's who in the picture. So then understand the disease. This, again, is very important for anticipating prognosis. Limb onset ALS presents very differently than bulbar onset ALS. There's a potential for pseudobulbar affect, which is the discrepancy between the internal emotional experience and the external affect that's describing that experience. Being prepared for that is knowing what kind of disease you're living with, knowing what the pharmacology options might be and how those might impact. It's important to understand the type of ALS that you're dealing with because, as was discussed yesterday, Nicholas Jackson talked about invest in your voice. If we don't know that we're dealing with pseudobulbar ALS, then we don't know that we need to initiate voice banking, message banking sooner in the disease process rather than later. And then identify values. What is most important to any individual person living with this illness? What's important to their family? Where are the challenges? What are the key quality of life criteria that need to be identified? And how do we describe the goals to sustain those? Early care planning lowers the decision burden for people when they know what the patient's preferences are. What if and what then? So we began this discussion, these conversations with our patients and their families from a perspective of what if. ALS does not present in the same way for every person with the disease. And the things that we're going to talk about, the items I'm going to go through, might not all manifest for every patient with ALS. But we don't know. I've had patients that could speak up until the last moment of their life. I've had patients who lost the ability to speak early in the process of the diagnosis. We've had patients that could walk up until the very end. So knowing and encouraging and supporting people's engagement in these what-if conversations allows people to attain a sense of mastery and anticipation over outcomes instead of just reacting to what shows up. Anticipated future and how to exert choice of the timing of different interventions, including death and the legality of those options. We want to make sure that we offer a sense of control in a disease process that is defined by a relentlessly progressing loss of control in many different areas. So the first area that we want to discuss is activities and interests. What's most important to this person? What's most important in their lives? What are the activities that constitute a quality of life for this individual? What are the challenges getting in the way? And what has changed that impedes those activities? So yesterday we heard from Sarah Solomon and Helen Carey, embracing risk in OT interventions. Maybe what's really important to somebody is being able to smoke. Let's make sure that we make that happen. Let's prioritize that, but we have to know it. We have to define it. Maybe we heard from Claire Radcliffe yesterday about the role of exercise in the context of a person's life. Let's know about that exercise. What's important about it for them? What kind of exercise? How can we help them do it as safely as possible, but also acknowledging the dignity of risk, that sometimes the quality of life means taking risks. There are many different choices that people might make. I had a patient once whose priority was bathing every day. That's what was important to him. And getting in place the resources for him to get the help that he needed to be able to shower daily was contributed enormously to his quality of life. So mobility. What if? What if I'm going to need assistance using my arms and legs? We need to start early in the process assessing current mobility and anticipated decline. Again, knowing the type of ALS. Assess what assistive devices are in place, assess the home's accessibility, determine the availability of equipment, and required learning curves. And this is important. What does it take to learn how to use this equipment? For example, yesterday we heard about eye gaze wheelchair driving, right? This is expensive. What are the resources? Do people have the resources to access different equipment? And what is it going to take to learn how to use it? In the United States, we have a very strict line between palliative care and hospice care. And some of this equipment is available while individuals are still enrolled in hospice care and then is no longer available once they're enrolled in hospice care. So in palliative care, they have access to resources that may not still be available once they enroll in hospice. So anticipating this need and ensuring that, that the resources are met when they're still available. What if? What if I need assistance with my ability to speak and to communicate? We need to assess an individual's ability to access augmentative and alternative communication. This could be the internet, smartphones, computer literacy and skill, Dynavox, voice banking, speech replication, and we heard a lot yesterday from John Costello and Nicholas Jackson about significant new tools that are available. But we also learned about the complexities of accessing those tools and being able to use them effectively. The need for early investment in voice messaging and in voice banking and message banking, the improved outcomes that happen with greater professional support and guidance. Is that support and guidance available? How do we find it? Where do we go to get it? And most importantly, speech is key to identity. We find over and over again that this is a topic that people are very resistant to really invest the energy in, because it means confronting a reality, a potential reality, without the ability to speak. Not everyone is able to do that, but our role is to educate and make sure that people know what are their options, what are their choices. They may choose not to avail themselves of them because of the identity issues, the fear of this particular future coming about, the complexity of really availing oneself to the maximum possible ability of the technology that's available. But we need to make sure that people are aware and that they're making informed choices. Okay, activities of daily living. So what if I need assistance with my daily needs? We need to assess in advance the availability of support both in the current moment and as the disease progresses and the needs increase. I always say that we want to look at the adequacy of caregiving in the moment and the sustainability of it over time. Are we going to be able to keep this up? Can this family keep this up? Does this individual have resources to hire the kind of caregiving they're going to need down the road? And there are privacy concerns, right? As an individual, maybe I'm not comfortable with the idea of someone I don't know providing this kind of care to me. Or maybe, as a family member, I'm uncomfortable providing this kind of care to a parent or to another family member. So assessing those privacy concerns and the availability of family resources to step in is really important in an anticipatory way. Memory, mood, and cognition. What if I experience changes in my personality? What if I experience cognitive shifts, changes in memory and reasoning ability? What if I experience emotional changes? Is my family prepared for that? Am I prepared for that? And we need to consider in advance what interventions someone might be prepared to avail themselves of if that happens. So are they prepared to consider counseling, psychotherapy, family counseling, psychoeducation resources? There are pharmaceutical interventions that may be available, possibly even memory care support. Cognitive impairment can inhibit decision-making, and it's necessary to anticipate that this might occur. The other important point about this is that conversation about what if. Well, if this happens, then these are the interventions I would be prepared to engage in. It makes it much more likely that those interventions will be accessed when the time comes, if the time comes. That pre-planning, okay, I get it. If this happens, if I start to experience memory changes or personality changes, here are the things that we as a family are going to do. Swallowing. So, a potentially life-limiting circumstance, right? So what if it becomes more difficult to swallow? What if I need to consider medically administered nutrition? Is this going to be exclusive or in combination with oral consumption, pleasure feeding, for example? What are the maintenance requirements? Is my family up for that? What are the risks of the surgery, the risks of infection? What is the timing, right? Because this intervention must be placed in advance of need in most cases, while the surgery can still be tolerated. We had a very detailed presentation yesterday from Gioia Ciani and Gary Grimaldi, the lived experiences of people with ALS and PEG tubes. Lung capacity impacts the ability to tolerate surgery. People need education about this process and its implications, and they need to be involved in the shared decision-making process and to include family and make sure that everybody's on the same page. They also need to consider, it's important to consider the possibility that at some point in the future, I might want to discontinue the use of this particular support. What would that look like? What would that mean? The emotional and spiritual, ethical consequences of deciding to discontinue the use of tube feedings are profound and not something we want to be surprised by. Also, I'd like to add there are new options for delicious pureed foods that we all got to try yesterday. And this may, in fact, impact someone's decision about what it means to potentially need pureed foods, and they might be willing to forego this particular intervention a little bit longer. So a lot of things are changing, and a lot of things are coming into play. We're learning so much here that I get to take back home. I love it. Okay.
So you only have a few seconds left, so I don't know if you want to go to your final...
I will move right through.
Yes.
Thank you. So breathing, also a life-limiting circumstance. What if breathing becomes more difficult? We need to consider the moral, ethical, religious implications of maintaining or discontinuing breathing assistance and life support. Consider the possibility of an unexpected terminal event. This can happen. Be aware that oxygen treatments can have unintended consequences like increased levels of carbon dioxide. But how do this conversation about the BiPAP needs to be navigated from the very beginning. And this is what Susan Brumby talked about yesterday, Unveiling the Silent Journey. How do we navigate informed consent around this BiPAP? How do we bring this conversation up at the beginning of BiPAP intervention, not at the end of the process when people are exhausted?
Could you go to your final slide, please?
Yeah. And physical and emotional exhaustion. What if I don't want to live like this anymore? Understanding rights, understanding options, and being aware of what those options might be. They're different between countries and from state to state within the United States. And I just want to add, future editions of this will have number 9. What if there's an emergency or a natural disaster, which we learned about yesterday from Jessica Mabe? We need to include that in the next edition here.
So thank you very much. Unfortunately, we do not have any time for questions, but it's a terrific guide.
Thank you.